Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to see you here. And the question we're here today to ask is how could we move beyond incremental innovation? Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm Mazor Kario, innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And today with me, I've
Hello.
got, Ole Tangsgaard. Great to see you.
Great to see you. I've really been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So Ule is senior innovation consultant, and we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, and you're much invited to join us and to ask questions, and we'll be happy to answer. So let's start. What is the biggest obstacle to innovation as you see it?
Well, I think one of the big obstacles to innovation is actually the dilemma that senior management is working on. Because on one hand, they have to run the business. And on the other hand, they need to focus on what kind of business do we want to also have in 5 to 10 years. And these two are very different leadership challenges that they have. Well, the first one is a lot about operational efficiency. They'll be in meetings talking about quality problems, talking about other kind of delivery problems. And then they want to go into meetings where they're talking about the more strategic, the more long-term innovation, where they're talking about, are we learning enough? How will this unfold? Is it big enough? And that's a completely different kind of leadership challenges, and also how you want to lead your people. I think that's one of the big, when you talk innovation in a corporate context.
Yeah, you're right. I think that the tension between what we need to manage right now and what we could be or could do in the future is something that you need to hold all the time and to deliver the understanding and to tell the story for both sides all the time. So you could tell us you have like so much experience either from that side of a corporate and from a consultant point of view. So tell us a bit, how do you see that from your experience?
Well, I think it is true. I've been on both sides, working with bigger Danish companies like Grundfos and Lego, and now also for 3 to 4 years now working as a consultant. So I think what we are discussing a lot is about how can you build a systematic approach to this strategic innovation that can help companies being able to do that on a continuous basis. So just not by luck and one-off innovations. And that's where we work a lot. And what we're looking a lot on, and where we see the difference is a lot, what is the level of uncertainty when you start? Right. And that's our entry point. Because if the level of uncertainty is low, then a lot of companies have very well-established structures with stage gate and planning structures and other things that works very well. But when the level of uncertainties are high, then these systems very often get into problem because the CFO, he will often ask for a business plan way too early when the level of uncertainty are far too high. There are far too many questions to be able to make a business case with any level of reliability. So that's some of the big challenges that mature companies have, because they've become so used to being able to predict things. They've been so used to develop operational efficiency and avoid talking about uncertainty and just do the risk mitigation, where they also have tools.
Yeah.
So I think that's some of the things we see a lot. That's a big change for these mature companies. And it's also difficult because that's how they become big. Grundfos became big, becoming world champions in producing circulator pumps at very high quality, at low production cost, and they can produce them with very high delivery service and best-in-class features at a low production cost. But what if they are to do something else?
Yeah, especially right now when we're talking about uncertainties, we have this COVID crisis outside and everything is changing. So in innovation, we always need to talk about uncertainties, but right now it's even much more than that. So it's a big challenge for companies, I would say.
It is, yeah.
So what do you think is needed in order to innovate better within these uncertainties?
Well, I think it is to have, I think one of them is to have a systematic approach, that instead of just trying to force fit your innovation effort into your existing structures with stage gate and other things. You need a system that can help you reduce these uncertainties upfront. And that's a much more learning-based environment where you're working on learning iteration. And on one hand, that's a lot like in the startup world, where you want to have your sprints. You want to learn one step at a time, and then you use your learning to design the next learning loop. But where it differs, and that's also one of the challenges, that we meet a lot of people in the corporate context who read the startup books, and we need to do sprints, and that's correct. But the resource and organizational uncertainties, they're quite different in the corporate world.
Sure.
In corporate world, it's a lot about strategic alignment. In the startup world, it's about how can you survive until you can get funding? How do you make your exit strategy? And that's two very different things. And that's also a big challenge in a lot of companies to organize around that. How can they have a governance for that? Do they make committees, or how do they do that? And what kind of people should be on these committees? What are the decision criteria to go from the conceptualization and discovery into the market experimentation and incubation? What are the decision criteria? They're so used to from the stage gate 3, that's the business plan. But now they need something else. And that can be difficult, because in this corporate theater, that happens a lot. They used to have some set pieces that they can always go back to, and now I know what you're talking about. But if they don't?
I totally agree. For many years, I worked with tech companies and startups. So they have a kind of a mindset of explorer, trying things out. And then when I went into innovation with more mature companies, you see that you need to adjust these way of thinking, these processes, in order to align to the way that they work, to the people, and the way they think. They think really differently in a corporate than what you see in tech or in startups. And this a gap it needs to be a bit smaller when you do it. Like you do sprints, but in many cases, I've done lots of sprints and then it doesn't get executed. So they have a great idea, but will they fund it? Will they go further? Could they really create that till the end? It's a big challenge for a corporate. And if they don't have this system and culture, it's like stuck in the middle. It's not going further.
Exactly, and there are different places where you can get to some showstoppers. Some of them, they spend far too much time in discovery, conceptualizing, where they want to bring it almost to a business case level, and they make analysis paralysis, and far too often that's happened behind the desk instead of talking to thought leaders and figuring out what are the trends. Then in incubation with the market experimentations, too often we see that they have a great idea, and then somebody in the sales organization say, that's a great idea, run with it, and then they incrementalize, meaning that they take the best idea and try to make a product out of that and move that into the commercial part of the company. And they are not able to capture the full potential of what it actually could be, because then the idea becomes just one product instead of a portfolio of products. Then they come to the acceleration phase where they want to scale. And many times we see then they'll spend all the money and they can't get support to scale it up, make the market creation that's sometimes needed. That you need to have some level of understanding of, if a company is going from a B2B business model into a B2C, then probably you'll need to invest something in getting into that market. And that can be pretty high investments. And you need to be ready for that. You need to set the expectations that that's going to happen. And that discussion is not necessary if you're in the core business, because if you want to make the next generation of your cash cow, nobody questions whether you need to invest in marketing and
you have your base of clients and you have your brand within a certain domain. So it's kind of easy to do some kind of an adjustment, and you still have your audience, and it's just fine. If you want to go to another audience, you need to invest in it. And that's something they did not do maybe for tens of years, and it's different than what they're used to. So what are the challenges you think like innovation leader are facing these days with the Corona crisis?
Well, I think there are different with the Corona crisis. I think also if you look on the technical part, I think some of the technology, some of the technology, is that feasible now with the new circumstances that we have? So there will be new questions that's popping up on the market. Will the infrastructures, the ecosystems, are they still sustainable? There are big companies like my former company, Grundfos, who have to think about how are we sourcing? Do we need to have more regional sourcing to be able actually to source the components to make our products? So that changes all of that. The purchase department going to have economy of scale. Do they need more suppliers to have a more robust system? On the resource side, what kind of partners do you need to make that work? Do you also need maybe to hire somebody who can work more on business model innovation compared to people who can work on the technical innovation, on the product innovation? On the organization part, do we need to adjust the strategic intent, the strategy beyond the normal strategy horizon of 3 to 5 years? Do we need to change a little because the world is changing?
Yeah, everything is changing.
So I think that raises a lot of questions that needs time to discuss and figure out how does that fit to our company. And there's not one fits all. It has to be with that particular company. What is the DNA of this company?
Right. It really makes sense to me that since everything is changing around you and maybe your clients, your market, your competitors, everything around you is changing, you need to think what is the parts that you need or should or could change, to adjust to all the changes outside. And it's hard.
It is hard. And it's the typical strategy dilemma also. Many companies, it's quite easy to discuss what you want to achieve. And it's a lot harder to discuss, okay, in order to achieve this, then we want to give up this. That can also be difficult, especially if that's a sacred cow in the company. We've always done it like this.
Yeah.
Now you need to give it up to be able to become world champions in something else.
Yeah, I think that giving up on things that you are sure about and you got results in the past is so hard for them. And it really makes sense because till now it worked. It worked really fine. Mm-hmm. And now you're saying, okay, you need to consider something else. Why should we? It's really hard to see the results in the end in the market. It takes time. It could be like in 2 years, but in 2 years, will you be ready for that?
Exactly.
And it's hard to convince.
Exactly. And that leads into metrics as well. Because in the core business, a lot of especially successful companies, they have very good metrics. They can know exactly what they're selling, margins, profitability, but how do they measure on something that they want to really commercialize in 3 to 5 years? How do they measure how they progress on learning? How do they progress on reducing uncertainty? That's also for a lot of people in the corporate world. That's relatively difficult because it's not that as tangible as what they're used to.
Yeah,
they can't see it in the ERP system.
Yeah, if you have like ROI, it's very clear. This is how much, and it's calculated. And something which is not tangible, it's hard to really relate to, and it's hard to just think about it as progressing if you don't see the bottom line results, which is hard.
And I would assume that in many companies, I've been part of it myself. If you make a business case for a new product generation, then you try to sugarcoat the numbers a bit to make it profitable. Yeah. Everybody knows it. But what if you have something that's longer into the future with more uncertainties? Then it becomes a lot harder to get people to believe that is this really feasible?
Yeah. I think that what we discussed in the last time is about Lego, that only when they came into this point that they couldn't do anything and very, very lone point in the company, they decided, okay, we don't have any other choice. We should just try something completely different.
Yeah, the burning platform certainly helps to make change. Absolutely. But it also limits what kind of change you can make. So it's not that you should ask for a burning platform.
No.
So there's a lot of change management in this. How do you orchestrate that? To unfreeze, to be able to create something new. And you need to look at what's the state the company is, what's the environment it's operating in.
Yeah, what I talked about in the case of Lego is the urgency. So how can
Mm,
you create this urgency when everything is just fine? We've done everything as till now in this certain process in this certain way. So how can you make them be anyway compliant to the change or needs to change or really want to change if everything is working just fine? So a crisis like we have right now or what Lego had in the past is a point that you could not continue to
mm.
say that everything is just fine, everything is
Correct.
working as it worked.
Correct. But I think one example is actually what Grundfos did in 2008, where the CEO made an initiative, looked into what are the trends in the world, and he made actually a white paper, an innovation intent, describing how he envisioned, together with his leadership team, how he envisioned Grundfos in 2025.
Wow.
And one of the bullet points in that, or one of the sections that was about that, they imagined that 1/3 of the turnover would be something that was not necessarily related to pumps. So I think that could be a way to create a sense of urgency throughout the organization. And there was a big effort on communicating that innovation intent, so the employees knew that we still want to be. Another bullet point was, by the way, we still want to be number one in circulators. So there was a very good communication about this is what we want. From
Yeah.
top leadership, that we want to be able to have solutions, offerings to the market that goes beyond pumps.
Yeah.
So I think
And
that's a
it's
very
like,
proactive way
yeah.
to set some kind of urgency, and it's a lot about creating a compelling vision that people want to follow.
Yeah,
So
it's a vision very to the future from
yeah,
2006 to 25, which is like lots of years ahead.
yeah,
But this is a trajectory. This is where we're going,
yeah.
right? And it allows people to experiment and to try to get there and maybe be incentivized on their way there, and not only seeing the result right now because we have something like upcoming for our future.
True. And it also tells them that for this third of the turnover, it's not just continuing to be the best to develop and put pumps to the market. We need to be able to be first class at something else next to that. And I think that's a very strong message to send to the organization.
Yeah, we have a LinkedIn user. I'll show you what he's saying, which is very interesting. As a leader in a company, I would be more comfortable knowing there is a team that is building long-term opportunities, capabilities, and potential opportunities, and is following a learning cycle process than having a team that is building presentations with sugar-coated MVPs.
Absolutely. I hope also that was what I said, to build this system that R&D is that for discovery and incubation, where we have the high levels of uncertainty, that have the right methodology, that's building on iterative learning, that's built on working on business proposals, talking about what could be at the end of discovery instead of NPV, and that
Mhm.
have a very high level of capability of doing market experimentation, which, by
Yeah,
the way, is also very different from what I used to do when I was a product manager. Because when I went into the market, there was a lot doing field tests to test that the product wouldn't fail at the end of the development cycle. Whereas here, you're going in to learn. So it's a lot about what is the best possible learning prototype you can make at a
yeah,
very low cost that you can afford to do a lot of learning cycles. And that's two very different thinking, because a lot of engineers in well-established companies, they are quite reluctant to go into the market to learn before they have a close to perfect product. Because
yeah,
in sales, they don't want to go out to a customer if they are not an expert on the product. But now you need
yeah,
to go out and say, hey, I am here because I want to learn.
yeah,
I have a great idea that I think this could be good for my company. I think it could be good for the market and for where you want to learn. Do you want to learn with me? And that's a
yeah,
completely different approach to go into the market. And that falls into this comment as well. That's what you need to build in your company to be able to do strategic innovation on a continuous basis. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's connected to another thing, which is how you see yourself as a leader, how you see yourself as a company, which is more exploratory and less like we know everything, we're best in everything, and we want to show it to our clients that we're always sure about what we're doing. Sometimes collaborating with your customers, with your maybe third-party business relations. So it's like understanding each other on your way more than I know, and I'll show you what I know. It's like
Exactly.
we learn together. And thanks for the LinkedIn user that helps us on that one.
Yeah,
So
it's very good to get that clarified.
yeah. So tell us about a use case from one of your clients and how you help them innovate successfully and not like incrementally. How did they do it?
I'll take a use case where it's actually part of the innovation journey for that. It was a chemical company where they had a business opportunity. They were working basically only B2B, selling ingredients to different kinds of stuff. So they had an idea for a business opportunity that would mean that they would go B2C. And the team leader, he was relatively frustrated when we started the program because he had a gut feeling, I'll be needing to do something when we go commercial. He knew very well how to make tests and clinical tests of all the stuff they were making, but he knew that he'll be needing to do something when he wanted to commercialize, to go. He didn't know exactly what. He tried to talk to senior leadership about investing in partners, and that failed. But when we started with to introduce the discovery, incubation, acceleration, to talk about the conceptualization, the scoping, the vision for it, and also introduced a system of actually internal innovation coaches that helped him ask the right questions and identify what are the most critical assumptions based on this. And he started shifting the dialogue with his committee. At one meeting, I was coaching. I said, "What will happen instead of talking about all your test results, talking about everything you know? Instead, you start the meeting saying, look, guys, this is what we want to do. This is the assumptions we're building this on. These are the most critical ones, and get it out of the open and start discussing that." And the next meeting, it was totally different because he came back. All of a sudden, he got the support of his committee. Instead of getting a meeting where they were discussing if one test result was good or bad, if it should be 2.3 versus 2.4. So he got a completely different dialogue with his committee when he turned it around. And that was in early incubation, to talk about what is it actually we know we do not know.
Yeah.
And this is our plan, how we want to reduce this uncertainty.
Yeah, I
And
think
so
that
changed
changing
the game for that particular opportunity.
Yeah, it's like changing the dynamics within the group, and in many cases, from the other episode that I had, people are talking about creating a culture of innovation and co-creation and talking about things together, and not something which is less in most of these companies in their core. Products and services, they have something which is very hierarchical, and it works when you know what you're doing exactly and you have the system to support that. But in the unknown, we need something which is more like a collaboration of a net, and this is what we aspire to have in the culture of the company when we're thinking about the future, the unknown future, actually.
Exactly, and it's the culture and the ability to do the storytelling, to tell a compelling business vision. A business proposal is a lot more important, and that's very similar to the startup world. You need to be able to do a good value pitch. And one of the things that we also find very often, we are working mostly with technology-based companies, and a lot of the innovation opportunities actually comes out of the R&D. And it's very difficult to get them to talk about the innovation opportunities beyond the technical part.
Yeah,
and a lot of times,
because they are technical people, they understand it really well.
There are very good reasons for that.
Yeah.
But we also find that through experience, and actually also research shows, that a lot of the good innovation opportunities, they actually fail on resource or organization uncertainties. that they don't get the right partners, and that could be for the development or for commercialization, or it doesn't fit very well with this. There's no good strategic alignment, or important stakeholders in the sales organization who's going to commercialize it afterwards is not in place, or it falls between two strategic business areas. A lot of times that can be the showstopper.
Yeah,
And
which is
and
like it's a shame because you have the
yeah,
resources, but you don't delegate them as well as you could in order to make it successful. Because it demands a different way of thinking than what you had in this matrix of your organization. Needs to be a bit more flexible, maybe, in order to make it.
true. And you need to orchestrate it differently, because the structures might not be there. And sometimes when you go into acceleration, companies would need to make actually a strategic acceleration unit to make it happen, because if you have a brilliant new business ideas and it cannot live up to the numbers of the existing products, there's a high risk that someone in the sales org say, well, it looks great, but I'd rather sell this because it's a lot easier to make my numbers here, and that's the way I get my bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree that you need to maybe incentivize it differently, because how can you really relate to a new initiative, a new project, a new product or service as the same as a very, very old or traditional or something that you've done so well? And even for the sales, they know how to sell it. They know what to say in order to sell it. So it's easier for them. So it really makes sense. And what you said about the developers, that they don't know how to sell the idea, or to do the storytelling that is needed in order to convey their ideas. It's so important for an organization, which is a tech organization, to utilize their resources better, because they have the ideas and they have the talent and they have the knowledge out there. But many cases, these people who are very brilliant don't have the power or even the opportunity to express that, which is, it's a shame that they're not using their own employees. And sometimes their employees, even like they really want to do something which is challenging and different and to take responsibility for a new thing, and they don't have the opportunity to do it, which is
true. And they'll need some level of guidance also. I think I've also been in situations where I had a colleague once who said, well, sometimes it's like stone management. Go find a stone to me and come back, and then come, here's the stone. Oh, I need something a little different. Go find another stone. And that can be frustrating in the long run. And certainly the company will not profit on that.
No, it needs to be managed in a sense. So what would be like the best tips and practices for change makers and innovation leaders as you see it?
Well, I think one of them is to work on your communication skills. How do you, this value pitch, like in the startup world, and get all around your opportunity, not just as a technical solution, but what is the value creation in the market? What is the value creation for the company? And what could this be? So I think that's one very important thing. And then communicate and communicate some more. And I think one thing is also, we really like in our team, we like the Mark Twain quote, that it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So it's this openness to go out and really learn in the market, and also in the organization, to ask the right questions, and not just, oh, it says that we want to do this in our strategy. Yeah, this was maybe written 10 years ago or 5 years ago. What does it mean now things has changed with COVID? Does it still have the same meaning? And maybe there's a new VP in the position. How does he see it? Go out and communicate, get the dialogue.
Yeah.
To understand what's really about.
Being more open-minded in a sense to something that you don't know. It's like really telling yourself, I don't really know. I have to verify it before. It's not only my gut feeling, or this is written that this should be this way. Let's ask and talk to people within the company and outside, and the clients and potential clients, and really hear and listen to what they have to say. Which is another talent, to listen really well. Absolutely. To communicate and listen and communicate, I would say. So what would be the most surprising thing you learned about innovation after all these years of experience?
Well, I think from when I started, I think that is the part that it's actually the R&O, the resource and organizational uncertainties that get in the way. How important that is, because I think as an engineer, I think you're trained. If you make the perfect solution, then it'll sell itself. So I think that has been, if I look back to when I started this journey and to now, I think that's probably the biggest surprise. How much about this culture, behavior, mindset, how important that is to be successful. I think probably that's the biggest in the journey I've had since I started many years ago, 10 years ago on
Yeah.
this journey.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we have another Ram Shetty. If I'm not wrong, effective communication and storytelling are the key for innovation. So, right, we totally agree with you, Ram. Yeah.
It's definitely, yeah.
It's really so important. What you talked about the soft skills of
Yeah.
people. Most people, when they think about innovation, they think about the tech part.
Yeah.
Do you understand all the tech trends and all the technology related to that, and really understand it to the details, which is only one part, and maybe it's more measurable and tangible. Do I understand AI or not? Do I understand blockchain or not? And what is really needed is to see the vision and communicate the vision, and without it we cannot really do anything. Idea is just an idea before something is created and tested and seen in the real world.
Exactly, and I would also say that an idea is just an idea until you start to put some flesh on the bone. You begin to talk about what can it do in the market, what can it do for the company, what is the value creation. Then you can begin to measure. Then you can begin to compare whether one opportunity is more attractive than another. And if you're in very early stage, don't put it into a spreadsheet and then let that decide what you're doing. You can use spreadsheet to have good guiding questions. And then you need to get the dialogue, the discussion. Okay, how do we rate them? How do we want to build our portfolio of discovery opportunities, incubation opportunities? How do we want to have a strong portfolio with some with higher uncertainties, some with lower uncertainties that fits our company and the stage we are in? Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's so important to see this as something which is like a learning experience, that you have something in the beginning and then you learn more and more about what you thought, and the way you see things is changing while you're doing it, and it's something more humble in a sense, because it's not like we know everything. We are so good at like pumps or something like that.
True. In that way, it's humble. On the other way of thinking, you could also say you need to believe in your vision. So it's yes and no. So it's humble in the sense that and it's. I think there was also somebody who said, the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. So to have this mindset, but I think it's also important that you really find something you believe in, because how do you expect people to follow you if you don't believe in the idea yourself, in the vision yourself? So right. That's also important. You don't need to want to be that humble that people think, oh, doesn't he believe in what he's saying?
Yeah, I didn't mean that you will be like humble and won't say what you think. I thought about humble of not knowing and maybe experimenting and learning on your way, and not knowing everything in advance. And then once we know everything, then we could do something with it. It's more like we're all learning on the way, for sure.
Exactly. Maybe just one thing that just comes to mind. I think it's also important for corporates when they want to build a capability for innovation. They will also have to look in their different roles. And we see that it's relatively seldom that we see people that are brilliant in discovery, in the conceptualization, that also will be brilliant when they need to accelerate, because that's also two different worlds. There's also a difference between being the people who's trying to synthesize ideas from thought leaders, from own thinking, from lab experiments for discovery, and those who are more in a leadership role, who are trying to orchestrate a portfolio, who are working on establishing, creating, and maintaining the organizational legitimacy towards other senior leaders. So there are different roles in that as well. I think that's also important to understand. And some of them, especially if you work on assessing opportunity, will need to have a deeper understanding of technology, because part of it is for sure also the feasibility of a technology. And so I
For
think
sure.
that's also important to understand when you talk about what kind of people do you want working with innovation in corporates.
Yeah,
That
it's like
different
we
roles.
need both parts. One is more
Yeah,
of a vision and planning and seeing the strategy forward, and the other one is more like executing. How can we create that within our company, and how can we really create something, not only a vision, but
yeah,
go into the details. And in the details, we need all these people who know how to really go and understand the technology to the details and to create that. It's not enough to talk about it, for sure.
exactly. And sometimes it's great to have, if you're working on digitalization, sometimes it's great to have somebody who can do high-level coding if you want to make a fast learning prototype. So that can be very
Yeah.
valuable.
Sure. Yeah, I think that in general, to know how to create a fast experiment,
Yeah.
how can we create something fast and experiment? It's so important to know that we're in a direction. We don't know the details in the end, but we know that this is something that we could do,
Yeah.
if it's the right direction.
Yeah. But actually, one surprise to me, working with some chemical companies, I think, when we talked about designing learning experiments, it was very clear that when they want to ask an outside agency to do some clinical test, they were brilliant about setting up the requirements, how do they measure results. But when we start talking about how can we make some experiments about is this valuable to the market, who will buy, then it's a lot more difficult for them to be specific on what is our learning hypothesis, what is it we need to learn, how would we know if we got a result that will help us forward. So
Yeah,
that was actually also a little surprising that it's not that easy to transfer that skill from their main skill as a chemist or a biologist or whatever the background, scientist, to another field that's into consumer behavior, market behavior, or business models or other things. And so that also needs some coaching to help these people to do that.
Yeah, I think it's what we said about like open-mindedness, that you could you have the skill, you have the talent, but you could use it in other like prismas, and you can see in different matrices it could be used, and it really demands a flexibility from these people to see things differently and to act differently in different processes, and it's a great learning opportunity for people, as if they want to learn, of course.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're almost done, and it's been a pleasure. So where could people hear more about you and contact you? I'll elaborate your screen. So
I think the easiest way is to go to my LinkedIn profile, and under my contact information, you'll find the links to our innovation group, where you can read more about how we work in our innovation group, our methodology, and there are also case stories that you can follow. You can see bios of other team members. So I think that's the easiest way to learn more about what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, Ole, to have you with me, and very inspiring and interesting as always. And we should talk again for sure.
Absolutely. It was a big pleasure. So I'm looking forward to get the opportunity again, and hope it has been helpful for the people out there as well.
Yeah, I really hope to. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining me. We'll be here again next episode. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.